Okay, so we're live now, and so Joe, Vinay, I think we've had a chance to introduce ourselves, but Vinay, we were going to ask you as the founder of your toolset ADM, ADSM, and
Hmm.
ADM Web. Um, Joe has downloaded the workspace from GitHub. He's cloned it,
Yep,
and
I
then
have the workspace, and then I've also cloned down I think it's the main one. It's Vinay Programs ADM. I
Yeah,
just cloned that one.
yep.
Looks
So
like from
if
what
you have
I
if you have cloned the workspace and opened it, it will automatically clone ADM. So you don't have to reclone it again. What it's doing is basically pull down ADM. Currently, I have turned off ADSM because it needs to be migrated to the new code base. So I'll be doing that over the weekend. But ADSM comes much later. It's on a much higher level, so we can go there. But otherwise, ADM should be cloned into Workspace. It also clones ADDB. I'll get to what ADDB is, and a bunch of Visual Studio Code extensions that I wrote to help with ADM. So
okay.
cloning the workspace and running it should be good enough for you to get started on everything.
Okay, so looking at the workspace, there's a .dev container. Should I run the start.sh file in there?
No, so if you're in Visual Studio, you can run this. So if you say Command Shift P, if you're in Windows, probably it's slightly different. So you
I'm on
have an
Linux.
op. Okay, so on Linux in VS, you're on VS Code, right?
Yes.
Okay, so there should be an option to reopen in container. Like on the bottom left corner, there is this blue small box. When you click on it, it says reopen in container.
Oh, so I should open this up in VS Code first. Just been looking at it in the
Yeah,
command line for the most part.
yeah. So the way I work is I make a copy of the workspace for every project I use, so that changes in the workspace in one project doesn't really affect the actual cloned copy that I have.
Okay,
In the
so
meantime, give me a second.
that open. Yeah, I'm sorry, I do not use VS Code very much.
No problem. That should be pretty easy to use. So what you can do is make a copy of the workspace into a different directory. Give it a name of your project that you're using. That way you know that every time you go into that project, you can open it in a container.
Okay. All right.
So in the meantime, let me present my screen too. Yep. I hope you're able to see my screen.
yes, we can see your screen.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. So I've opened the default cloned one, but as I said, you can make a copy and then we can get started.
Okay, I'm open up my copy right now.
So in Visual Studio Code, you can say that you can say open folder and you should be able to open it directly in VS Code. You don't need a project file or something.
Yep. Okay, so I just did that. And then the two little blue greater than less than signs at the bottom left.
Yeah,
I want to click
yeah,
on.
yeah. So you have this
Oh,
reopen
okay. I
in
think the
container.
problem was I didn't have the dev container module
Okay.
installed yet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Visual Studio extensions, if you don't have it, probably it won't give you that option. So if you have it installed, let me know. I can
Yep,
continue from there.
I just
Yep.
installed it.
Mm-hmm.
So what configuration do I want to use? Okay, so it's starting right now.
Okay. So I already had certain things set up before we got on the call, so mine may open a little faster than yours. But in your case, maybe it's just pulling a few Docker packages and images.
Yeah, it looks like it's downloading a lot.
Yeah. So actually, if you look at the Docker file, it's installing a bunch of DBN packages, and then it's actually pulling the ADM tool itself. It's installing Go, then installing ADM and ADDB, and then gets everything in place for you. But once you're done, you should
Okay, yeah, it
be
looks
able
like
to.
it's installing Go from source right now. Yeah.
Yeah. If this is the first time, probably it's going to take like a minute, minute and a half approximately.
Okay, looks like it's cloning the ADM repository. Now it's cloning ADSM. Oh, I got an
It should.
error.
Yeah. So if you can comment.
Yeah,
Can
I
you
got an
pull
error with
this?
ADSM.
Yeah. So ADSM needs to migrate to a new code base based on the changes I've made this week. So if you just comment out the Docker file just for the ADSM, the one that I'm highlighting.
Oh, it's got a really weird error.
Yeah, these errors are a bit confusing because it will say that the error is somewhere else, and you'll like go down a rabbit hole trying to figure that out. So if you can just
Yeah.
comment out the ADSM cloning part in Docker file, it should
I
work
may
for
have
you.
to start VS Code. I might have clicked on the wrong thing. It just made a huge like blob of it's a big string of text and numbers. Here, I'm gonna have to restart VS Code. I think I might have broke something there. Let's try this again.
The workspace that you have cloned, if you can pull the latest changes, these things should have been taken care. Like I finished updating it like 10-15 minutes before we started the stream. So I don't know whether you have the latest changes.
Let me try doing a git pull then.
Yeah.
Okay, that might have been the problem. Looks like it just
Mhm.
updated. Yeah, it updated the Docker file in the dev container.
Yep.
So I'll try building this again then. Okay, looks like we're in business now.
Great. If it looks like the screen I have with the bottom left showing dev container and the name.
Yep, dev
You should
container,
be able to.
ADM, and ADSM demo container.
Yep. So before we get started on ADM, I'll just show you a quick presentation. Let me know if you can see the slide share.
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, great. So normally when we do software development, you have multiple stages you do it in: requirements, architecture, design, code, and testing. This is your typical SDLC, what you call. It may be sequential, what we call waterfall model, or agile, where you take pieces of it and work on it continuously. When it comes to security, the industry has already figured out security requirements, stuff like HIPAA, GDPR, and some domains have their own security requirements, like industrial automation has ISA 62443 and so on. So requirements are pretty much defined based on the industry you're working on. Now, again, threat model has been around for more than a decade now. There are a bunch of tools that you can use. You have a bunch of options, especially if you're on Windows. The most popular one is Microsoft Threat Modeling tool. After that, typically what industry had been doing is list all the threats from the threat model, give it to the development team, and then forget it, and ask them to come back once they have implemented those security controls so that we can do code review and security scans. There is this huge gap between threat modeling and code review where the developers are on their own. They may come back to you for feedback, but not everybody does it. It really depends on the company culture. There's this huge gap between threat model and code review. And that's where I felt we need another tool for some kind of detailed design analysis so that we can formally analyze it in depth and kind of not hope for development team to know what to do. So the requirement for me was low-level design analysis, capture attacks and defenses. I wanted to follow Unix philosophy. That's why I started with CLI tools. And I didn't want to introduce a new language because we already have too many programming languages in the industry. Now, the inspiration started with Bruce Schneier's attack tree modeling. He published this paper way back in 1999. So this idea had been around for a long time, just that it never got into the mainstream. The second inspiration I was, or rather when I was looking for more details, was from Kelly Shortridge's 2021 blog on using decision tree modeling as part of security analysis. Again, she spoke about putting attacks and defenses into a single big graph, and the image you're seeing on the right is actually from her blog. So I'll share this presentation after we are done with streaming. So you can go read her blog about how to think about decision tree, security decision trees. So the first tool I created was ADM, which basically picks up a Gherkin and BDD language. I don't know whether, have you ever worked with Gherkin or Cucumber tools?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, the first time I've seen this was I think I looked at one of your examples for the holiday break.
Okay. So Gherkin and behavior-driven development has been around for more than a few decades now. This was initially used to capture feature specifications, and then you can map them to testing tools so that you can verify that the feature have actually been implemented in the right way. This language was created for that, and it was a very simple language. It only took like an hour for anybody to understand how to use this language. So I decided I'll pick this and make some changes. So what I did was, the first step was to change the feature keyword to model. And then the scenario keyword could either be attack or defense. So depending on what keyword I'm using, I'll figure out whether the scenario is talking about an attack or a defense. Now the given when statements and then statements are basically to say what is happening. Given tells you the preconditions, when tell you what actions you're going to take depending on whether you are an attacker or a defender. And then is the result you're expecting as part of that step. You can also do incident response. The defense layout looks the same. The way it's differentiating between incident response and preemptive is the way how the given, when, and then are being matched. So the matching, the way it works is you can sequence attacks by giving title of an attack as a given in another attack. Similarly with defense. Now, attack and defense sequencing can be done by matching the when statements in both attack and defense, or the then statement of an attack in the when statement. So the philosophy here is that when an attack is happening, if your defense kicks in, it's a preemptive defense. So you're basically building in security controls that immediately kicks in when an attack step is being attempted. Whereas in incident response, you actually need the attack to go through and generate a bunch of logs or alerts, and only then you can respond to them. So incident response waits for the then stage to complete, and only then you define the when statement of the defense. And again, an attack can try to break a defense by letting the defense's then statement complete, and then you, based on the results of the defense, you perform the next attack to basically circumvent it. And the ADM repository also has this image, so you can use this or print it out to make it easier for you when you're building attacks and defenses. So quick demo, I'll start with the container that we created. So I'll say test.adm. The simplest way to start is just say model and give it a title, sample model. Now, sorry, I have GitHub Copilot turned on, so let me just turn it off. So you don't have to talk about as an attacker, as a defender's pieces of it, because currently it's not going to appear in your diagram. What appears is attack and defense. So we'll directly get started with attacks and defenses. So let's say attack. Normally in an attack, you do a recon first. So my first step of the attack is scan the target. So again, for me to scan the target, there need to be a few conditions that need to be true before I can even attempt this attack. So the most obvious condition is it should be accessible over the internet if I'm really planning to target it. So I would say given target is open to the internet. So when given that the target is open, what I'm going to do is when I do an nmap scan. So when I scan the target for open ports. The most common example I give is of looking for an open SSH port so that I can directly get in and have shell access. So then port 22 is reported to be open by the scanning tool. So now we have a very basic model where you have an attack defined in the model. You can immediately run the ADM tool. So on the command line, if you say ADM ADM stat, my mistake. So ADM stat test.adm, it will basically tell you what it found at a high level, just the statistics. This is a good way to use the subcommand to test if your model is free of errors or syntactical problems. So this is like a sanity check to make sure that your model is defined right. If there was any errors, this is going to probably throw up an error. For example, instead of attack, if I say attacks, and if I run stat, it's not showing me any attack. It's just saying there is a model, there's nothing else beyond that. Because it's thinking the rest of this is just plain text, there is no attack information. So I'll fix that. Now, when I say stat, I see whatever I've written, it's being kind of listed as statistically on the command line. The next one is ADM graph, which basically generates the attack defense graph diagram that you need. So by default, what it does is it generates graphviz.dot. So
Okay.
I don't know whether you have used graphviz before.
No.
Okay. GraphViz is a diagram as code language. Again, it's been around since I think late 70s or 80s. It was initially created by Bell Labs, I believe, as if I remember correctly. It's been around for people have been using it for multiple stuff. Other tools have used it. So in the workspace, I've actually installed a plugin that translates it into diagram directly. So when you open graphviz.dot, you see a bunch of text defining what your diagram should look like. When you go to your command bar, you have an option to preview the graphics. So if you see the one that I'm highlighting here, when I press enter, it actually, so it actually pulls a diagram for you. So let me know if you're able to do this before I continue.
So I wrote a file that's basically a copy of yours. I did the stat command, but it doesn't give me my model name. It just kind of shows up blank.
So after model, do you have So after model, you need to have a colon and a space.
Yep.
And
Yep.
then the title of the model.
Yep. So I call it Joe's model. And
Okay.
then under that, I have double space, attack, colon, and then scan for open ports.
Uh-huh.
I don't know, like everything's showing up colored properly.
So
Let me
it
just
should
run it
at least
again.
show you. It should at least show you the model and attack in your command line when you run ADM stat.
Yeah, it does not. That's all blank.
Okay. Can you run ADM graph? And I'll probably stop sharing, and later we can debug your model.
Cannot initialize a null model object.
So probably you haven't saved your file.
Oh, yes.
Yeah,
That seems
I
to be
make
the
that
problem.
mistake.
I don't know. I'm used to it saving automatically.
Yeah.
It doesn't do that on Linux. Yeah, we're good now. We're good now. Let me run the graph. And then if I open graph was the command bar does not want to show up for me now.
If not, you can just go on the top and sorry. Yeah, Command Shift P is what I use on the Mac. Probably Control Shift P on Linux.
I'm just gonna look it up here real quick.
So if you're finding it difficult to get that part, there is an alternative that you can use. So
I
the
got
workspace.
it. I got it. So it's
Okay, good. Okay.
okay. So I want to open this graphviz file and then do that. Okay, so I have the GraphViz plugin, but it doesn't want to show my file.
Okay. So if it's taking time, there is an alternative that you can use. We have the dot command line tool installed, so you can type this command. So dot -t png. This is basically converting it from GraphViz into an image format. So the type is PNG, and -o tells you what is the output file name. I'll say test.png, and then say GraphViz dot. So if you can run this command alternatively. So it should have created
There
a
we go.
PNG. Yep. So you should now have the same diagram created as an image.
Yep.
A third alternative is I have a small script that continuously monitors your file for changes and automatically generates the diagram for you. So I have this tool called ADM CI, where I say test. So here ADM CI is actually listed, where I just tell what needs to be done. So I say ADM CI test.adm, and it monitors your test file for changes. So let me just open the PNG on to the side. Yeah, so I'll just show you, you can make those changes yourself later. So if I remove the attack definition itself and save this file, if you look at the command line, it's rebuilt the whole thing. So what it does is basically run the dot command. First it runs ADM graph, then the dot command, and then generate a graph.png. So now
Okay.
if I open graph.png, it's been generating the diagram as and when we work. So I'll put my code back. Now if I save it, the diagram auto refreshes for you.
Neat.
So when I'm really focused on building large models, I don't want to spend time on the command line getting it right. It's just too much of a distraction. So I wrote this simple continuous converter script, and it's part of the workspace, so you can directly use it. So the syntax for that is basically ADM CI and your ADM file name, and you're good to go.
Yep. No, that just runs as a job. Okay.
Yep.
And then you can.
So
Okay. Makes sense.
So before continuing, we need to add a defense. So what you're seeing on the diagram is basically the yellow box with red border is saying it's an unmitigated attack. You have defined an attack, you haven't mitigated it. So the next step is to create a defense. So in case of defense, I would say, now, first we need to figure out whether can we block a scan or not. I'm assuming we can, but certain targets you may not be able to do that. So first would be a preemptive defense where if I see continuous scans on or sequential scans on ports, so it starts from port 20, 21, 22. If
Yep.
my firewall sees that, it will block any kind of sequential scan. So the defense is block sequential scans. And so again, it's the same given statement. So when I type given, target is open to the internet when so since this is a preemptive defense, I need to have the same when statement from the attack. So here there's the first limitation we see in the when statement. When I say I cannot copy it directly because it doesn't sound right. So one of the best practices I recommend to everybody is to not start the sentences with I, we, and stuff like that. And also not start it with a verb, like an action word. So I'm going to change this to say when target is scanned for open ports. It's the same statement, slightly worded differently. So when I copy it into defense, it sounds pretty much like it fits into the defense also.
Right,
So
that makes
it
sense.
improves your
keep things simple.
Yeah.
Don't
Yeah.
use
It
completely
improves-
complete sentences.
Yeah. And also it improves readability because if you're giving this to a colleague who would continue working on this, it's very easy for them to read through it and understand. When target is scanned for open ports. And I'm also going to add an AND statement. So AND statements can be added to given, when, or then statements to expand the scope of those blocks. So here I'm expanding the when with a second statement saying when target is scanned for open ports and the scan is found to be sequential. So I'm basically saying in defense, I want to first have attacker scan it, and I want to confirm that it is sequential. Then block all from that IP. Or rather, I would say all requests from that IP are blocked. Because again, I don't want to start with an action word because when I copy it into another section, it doesn't sound right. So it's always better to avoid verbs or starting with I and we.
Okay. And the and block, does it can it be indented or does it need to be in line with everything else?
It need not be. The way the tool looks at it is if there's an and, it looks at the previous statement to confirm which part of the block it belongs to. So it sees that it's a when statement. So this and is kind of tied into the when.
Okay. And then can you add multiple ands?
Yes.
Okay.
And one more condition. Now, these would not appear on your diagram, but these can be then used in other blocks to refer to the exact defense. So I can have like 10 or 20 ANDs if you want. The tool will
Okay.
still work fine.
And can we use OR as well?
Currently, there is no OR. What you have is a but. And the problem is but doesn't sound right in certain defense scenarios. So currently, we don't do much of processing about the but. Normally, when you see an R, it means that maybe these are two separate defenses, because
Right. Yeah.
you're checking.
I wasn't really sure OR would be that important.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
guess it's not.
Yeah. I still haven't seen somebody really needing an R and having no other option but to use an R. If that is the case, I can update the tool to. It's a very small update, because
Okay. I
instead
was
of and I
mainly
process
just
an R.
curious.
Yeah. So what for me has worked is whenever I see an R condition, thinking about it kind of leads me always to the fact that these are two separate defense blocks that I need to separately put. An attack may be mitigated by two separate defense steps. That's always possible. So
Okay. Yeah, you're right. That does make more sense to have two defenses for the same attack rather than having one defense with an OR. Okay.
Yeah. So I'll just remove this third AND because it was for demo. So now when I save it, it automatically regenerates the diagram. And now you see that it's not a yellow box, but just a red box saying this was an attack. And then you have a purple box that says block sequential scans. Now the coloring also is designed to kind of replicate how people talk about it in security industry. Red teams are for attacks, purple teams are the actual preemptive defense guys, blue teams are the ones who do the monitoring and response. So the coloring is also designed that way so that it's easier for people to understand what's going on. So this basically defines your attack and defense. I'll just create another defense to show preemptive defenses. Notify network operations center. Now, normally notifying them on Nmap scans is not a good idea, but just for demo's sake, I'm going to put that here. So given target is open to internet. So this time I have to copy the then statement because it's an incident response. So when port 22 is reported to be opened by the scanning tool, then, and again, I'll say, and scan is found to be sequential. Then an alert is sent to network operations center. So now if you save it, you see that there's another blue box connecting the same attack.
Yep.
So the philosophy here is that not all attacks can be mitigated preemptively. Sometimes you have no option. For example, phishing. You cannot solve phishing 100%. It's a human problem. The only way you can handle it.
To some extent, you can block spam, but
correct.
Ultimately, if somebody puts in the effort, they can make anything look legitimate to a computer.
True. Yeah. So the strategy I always recommend to folks is always use a combination of preemptive and incident response defenses, because one mitigation alone cannot solve the problem 100%. So this is your basic model. There are additional stuff like assumptions and policies. I don't know whether you want to go through them today because these are slightly advanced topics.
I think this is probably good for now. I'll play around with this some more on my own time and just try and build something a bit more advanced. And then, maybe we could implement that into what I end up coming up with.
Yeah. Now, I created the Visual Studio workspace and plugins for large, serious kind of work. So your project engagement that you're working on, it probably makes sense to run it in Visual Studio. But sometimes you want to just get started building the model. You don't want to have an elaborate setup. So I created a web version of it. So if you go to security design github.io/ADM web, so this is a web version of the same tool, and it lets you write the code here and it immediately updates the diagram. So I'll just copy my diagram and put it here, and you see the same output coming up.
Yep. Yeah, I think Rod showed me this
Mhm.
tool a little while ago. Yeah.
Yeah. So normally when I want to, like, let's say I'm reading a security blog and I immediately want to start modeling it, I don't want to get my Visual Studio up and running, Docker up and running, and all of that. So this web tool helps me a lot, and it even works on iPhone and iPad. I've tested it. So I'm on a train, I'm reading a blog, I can immediately start recording my ADM documents. And this web tool also supports uploading and downloading from local file system. So once I've done this, I can click on this second download button and it creates a file and you can save it on your local system. Again, here legends are hidden, while on the PNG diagram, the legends were shown. I hide the legend here for easier, easier experience.
Right. Yeah, it makes it
If you-
easier to move around, zoom in, out.
Yeah. So if you click on this color palette button, it will show you the same legend here.
Oh.
And if you want to understand the language, there is this help that quickly tells you what ADM does, how are these connections being made, and so on. So that will teach you even about assumptions and policies if you want to explore it later. If not, we can do it in another stream. But this pretty much is what ADM tool all about. You can zoom in, zoom out, take a screenshot. Currently, ADM Web cannot export it into PNG or other formats. So I'm going to add
Right. I would
a
have
few more
to
features. Yeah.
pull that into my workspace.
Yeah. But maybe sometime in January, I'll be adding that support too, so that when you click on download, it'll ask you whether you want an image or just the ADM model. So you will have a few more features that you can exploit it to quickly get your model running.
Okay.
So
That's great.
this was pretty much about ADM. So best practices, again, as I said, don't use I, we, and so on. Don't use pronouns. Don't use verbs or action words, because again, it impacts readability. So there are a few examples in the ADM repository itself. When you clone the code, there is a tests examples directory, which has a few ADMs that you can try.
Okay, here, let me write down these links real quick. All right.
So I also have this sample toy model called friends.adm to show how adversarial game theory can be even modeled using this tool. So if you are modeling two adversaries who are competing on something, this tool can be used for that too. Now I'm going to skip the ADSM part because I want folks to be comfortable with ADM and modeling there before you switch over to ADSM. ADDB is another repository which has a bunch of ADMs and ADSM specifications. ADDB is basically a repository for all commonly used models. So if I have a model for, let's say, a Linux container, another model for Kubernetes, a third model for a Linux VM on AWS, I can start maintaining a repository of all my models and then refer it in other places. How to use ADDB is part of the ADSM tool, which we'll probably discuss in another meeting. in which case you can actually have a large threat model with multiple ADMs leading to a large attack defense model. That's pretty much the tools that I had developed. You already know about me, so I'm going to skip that. One thing I have seen is ChatGPT and GitHub Copilot are able to sometimes help you building these. So I have a custom ChatGPT, custom GPT that you can use to do that. So give me a second. Chat OpenAI. So here there's something called as Attack Defense Model Builder. I've also posted this in the Discord channel. If you don't have access to it, maybe I can just post it on Stream Deck chat for you. Yeah. So you need to have a ChatGPT Plus subscription to use it because that's how OpenAI enforces it.
Okay.
But if you do have that, you are able to actually describe your problem and it will start building a model for you. For example, I have AWS Linux VM. Give me a second. So I have an AWS Linux VM running OpenSSH server with so very basic version where somebody doesn't know anything about security. They are just going with the default settings. If I save, then it'll look into it and then start talking about based on your description. This is what I think is your problem. These are the potential attacks you're supposed to look at. Sometimes when you want to start a brainstorming, it's very easy to get started with ChatGPT. It's not going to give you an extensive list of attacks and defenses. I think mainly because they want to restrict the output of the AI for various reasons. So this is a good way to start it, but this will not be the end of you creating an ADM. Your ADM is a good enough toy model if you use this. So it'll ask you, does this look good? I'll just say yes. And then I have a bunch of details. Okay. Sorry. So this guy is not able to read from my knowledge base. I don't know why. Let's try again. Okay. Looks like it's not able to. So in the knowledge base, I'm explaining how to write ADM code. If sometimes ChatGPT is not able to read the markdown file for some odd reason, I don't know why. But if it's able to do this, then what you get is an actual ADM file that you can directly, or ADM content that you can directly copy paste it into a web editor or your Visual Studio Code. And it will give you a good enough model to get started and you can dig deeper on that.
Right. Then you can clean up any
Yeah.
thing the AI didn't quite do right.
Yeah. And because it's going to list the security topics for you, it may actually lead you down further in that path. For example, dictionary attacks. You can, if you have a dictionary, you can look at password dictionary attacks. Also on the defense side, you have websites that let you look up whether if a password has been breached. So you can start going down your own understanding of security and then also leverage MITRE ATT&CK and CAPEC. CAPEC is another source of information that you can use. So this kind of helps you kickstart very quickly on the model, and then you can go look at MITRE and CAPEC to further create your diagram. And in a few hours, probably you have a large enough diagram to basically start talking about security.
Okay. Well, this is great. Yeah, this is going to be a big help in our upcoming security reviews. Being able to generate these really quickly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
that's going to be really nice.
that's pretty much all I had to talk about ADM today. We can further explore it in detail in future sessions or have a one-on-one call if you want to specifically go look at something.
All right. Well, yeah, this was a great start. And yeah, I'm looking forward to making a few more test models myself.
And if I'm assuming you're part of the Discord group already.
I think so. Yeah, that's where I got the link to the GitHub like test page.
Okay. In that case, we can discuss on Discord if you don't have time for a call. So we can always have a chat on Discord if you're looking for specific details.
All right. Well, that sounds good.
Any other questions, thoughts that you want to discuss before we close this streaming?
No, I think that's about all the initial questions I had. Yeah.
Okay. In that case, I'll probably let you go play around with the tools. Feel free to ping me on Discord if you are stuck somewhere.
All right. Well, thank you. This is a nice tool, and I'm excited to see where it goes.
Yep, me too. I'm excited to see what you are able to get from these tools.
All right. Well,
yep. Take care.
that's that. All right.
Have a good day and Happy New Year.
All right. Happy New Year to you as well. And yeah, I look forward to working with this.
Yep. Yeah.